Kumlan Lavlat Gemara. We are up to the Pei Beis Amid Aleph in the middle of the page. And the last thing we learned was that all the Mishnahs in the future are all authored by Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is much more limiting in what he considers a neder that is inui nefesh, which is like harmful to herself, causes a pain, and and then we sort of didn't conclude. So those that are not in your nefesh, will he consider them as pleased as impacting their relationship beino lebeino or nothing? And we say no, it definitely is considered beino lebeino. That it means the husband still can annul it, but only as long as they have a relationship. And then we asked the question regarding tashva shamita, and we sort of didn't resolve that. So we are machmir. We treat it like a neder that is beino lebeino. According to the Rabbanan, we wanted to know if they hold that it's considered in your nefesh or beino lebeino. Therefore, we treat it like as if it's beino lebeino, and she has to be mata neder after they get divorced. Now we're up to the middle of the page of Pei Beis Amud Aleph. Omar Shmuel Mashmei de Levi, right in the middle of the page. Shmuel said in the name of Levi, Kol Nedarim, any neder, Baal Meifel Ishtay, a husband can annul his wife based on those two criteria that we learned. Chutz, except if she says, Min hanohosi aploni, she says, I forbid that person, the third party altogether, to have any benefit from her. Because they don't fall into any category. It's not painful to her if she doesn't want to give things to the other party, and nor does it directly impact on the relationship between her. Even if indirectly it impacts it, let's say that person's a close friend of his, it doesn't directly impact it. She'einu mefer, does not, he cannot annul. Avo, however, hanoas plaini alai, if she says, I don't want to have any benefit from that particular person, then we say that mefer, you can be mefer. You can annul it. Why? Because that's considered a neder of inner nefesh. She's causing herself pain because could be there's something that you need from that person, and now you deny yourself that opportunity. So giving to somebody else and denying that doesn't matter. But taking for someone else, you could be you're harming yourself. So we're going to ask a few questions from our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi was talking about. He said that if you're going to say that only one particular country, the fruits of that country is forbidden, it's not a problem. You always have an alternative source. No. So here also, so what if she says, I don't want to have anything from this person, but you can get from other sources, whatever. If she says this particular country, I don't want to have any fruits from them, that what do you call it? You can always get it from another place. So we see the fact that you can get it from another place. We don't care that, but this particular place you can get it from. So why suddenly if she says, I don't want to receive any benefit from that particular person, we say, that's inui nefesh. She's causing herself harm. But the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi comes along and he changes the whole thing around. He says, the Amra, when she said, the way we understand it according to Shmuel, when an our Mishnah says, I don't want to have any benefit from the fruits or vegetables in that particular country, she added one more phrase, that you will bring to me from that particular country. But I could still receive from that country if someone else brings to me. So that's all right. But over here, she said, under all circumstances, I don't have any benefit from that person. That is considered inui nefesh. Okay, Toshmar, let's continue traveling down the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, paid is chen v'zelai, I don't have any benefit from this particular store. And the din is, and yachal hafra, you cannot annul the neder because you can buy the same thing in other stores. It's not the only store that sells it. But the Mishnah, sorry, before we get to the but, so the Gemara over here again, we see that if you ban one particular place, since there are all alternative sources, it's good enough. So why, if she says, I don't have any benefit from a particular person, you're telling me that the husband can annul it because that's in your effort, she can get it from somebody else. The same thing. Hachanami, according to Rabbi Yosef, we will answer that the way Shmuel understands the Mishnah, the Ka'amra should tavi ata. She didn't say, I don't have anything benefit from that store. I don't want you to bring me anything from that store. But if somebody else brings the store, or I personally walk into that store, not a problem. So therefore, that source hasn't dried up. I didn't preclude any source. So there's no inyan nefesh. But in the case of Shmuel, in the name of Levi, there she's saying, I don't have any benefit from a particular person. I'm completely precluding him from being a source of any benefit to me. And that's a problem. So if that's how you learn, let me ask you a question. In the Mishnah, it says, if you add one more thing, if this woman said, I don't have any benefit from that store, and it turns out to be that this store is the only store that gives credit to her husband because her husband doesn't have a good credit rating, and this is the only store that sort of trusts him. So therefore there is no other source. Right? The husband can't go anywhere else because the husband cannot go anywhere else, no other source. Therefore, the husband can annul the neder. But if the only one that she forbade was the husband going in, but she personally could go in, or she can get others to go in, then the source didn't dry up. Why suddenly can he annul? The Gemara asks. The Mishnah continues, if that's the only source of a panasa, then the husband has a right to annul. If you can tell me, she's saying, I have no problem with that source, but the problem is, I don't want you to walk into that store to get it from me. I'm my offer. Okay, so the husband gets credit in that store, but the other people there can get credit, or she herself can go in. Ella must be mid the safer delay maisi bal have the ratio the kamaisi. He just lying in the safer, you're definitely gonna agree with me. It's not talking about a case where she's saying to the husband, you shouldn't walk in. She's saying, I don't want to have this source. Then in all cases talking about, she says, I don't want to have the source. Ella ratio the kamaisi. So it means that even in the beginning, the husband cannot, let's say in the case of the country, I don't have any benefit from that country. She didn't add that you should not bring me any benefit from the country. She's saying overall, I am excluding that country from my list of benefactors. In that case, and yet the Mishnah says he cannot annul because there are other sources. So how come Shmuel says the name of Levi? If she says I don't have any benefit from that person, then the husband can annul it. Why? So many other sources. So yeah. You're right. But our Mishnah, remember again, is Rabbi Yossi, the author of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi said that you cannot annul it. What he meant was, Rabbi Yossi holds it does not fall under Inui Nefesh, and therefore you cannot annul it as Inui Nefesh. But you could annul it as Beinoi LeBeinah. When it says that I don't have any benefit, any fruits or vegetables of that country, it means the husband can't say, oh, this is Inu Nefesh. It's not Inu Nefesh. You get other sources, but it's still impacting on their relationship. And then because the fact is now it has to struggle harder, has to maybe travel further, cost more, whatever it is, it's a bigger effort. So therefore, it's impacting on Beinoi LeBeinah. So you could be made for it. My question, Shmuel Levi is talking according to the Chachamim. The Chachamim don't agree with our Mishnah. And therefore, they say that if Taka, what would be the din according to Chachamim if she says I don't have any benefit from a particular country? The husband clearly can go ahead and annul it because it's Inu Nefesh. The same thing if she directs it against one person, it is Inu Nefesh. Umasisa Rabbi Yossi, the author of Amish Rabbi Yossi, Abuna said, Kula Pirka Rabbi Yossi, the time Mishnah, Perik Rabbi Yossi. And in fact, the my en yochel hafan Mishnah said you cannot annul it mishum inyan nefesh. That's to do doesn't mean you cannot annul it. You cannot annul it as inyan nefesh. Aber from the dorish bein lebinah, it can still fall under the category of beino lebinah. But that's a basic. According to Rachamim, it is inyan nefesh, even though you can buy it get it from other sources. It's inyan nefesh. And Shmuel is talking about according to the Rabban. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, the two dots. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Now this time it's not Shmuel saying the name of someone else. Rabbi Yehuda saying the name of Shmuel. Interesting thing. What about Nodra? Let's say she made a neder mistake. She made a neder. I will not eat tea. These 2 loaves of bread are forbidden to me. Be'achas misana u'be'achas ein misana. Now one of these loaves of bread depriving it causes a pain, and one doesn't. Now, what's the logic of that? So there's a machlekes rishonim how to understand pshat. According to some rishonim, she's famished. She's literally starving. But all she really needs is 1 loaf of bread to take away that hunger. So therefore, the first loaf of bread, or one of the loaves of bread, is inu. If she doesn't eat even 1 loaf of bread, she is really in pain. But once she has 1 loaf of bread, the second loaf of bread is pure luxury. So that is not inu. That's only beinoi lebeinah because she's going, depriving herself eating normal healthy food. So we're getting her carbs for the day. That's one way of understanding. The other way of understanding is one bread is made out of wheat and the other one is made out of barley or very rough wheat. So the bread made out of wheat, that's painful by denying herself from that. And the other one is not so painful. So what's the question? The question is as follows. She put them both in one neder. And the question is, the husband has the right to annul actually both Nedarim, but according to Chamin, the first one is called Inu Nefesh. So she has the husband has the right to annul it forevermore. But because the second loaf of bread was tagged to the first loaf, do we say that once one part of that neder is completely cancelled as if it's inui nefesh. So the other half of the neder also goes as if it's inui nefesh, and therefore forevermore it's gone. Or do we say no? The loaf of bread that's inui nefesh is gone forever. The other loaf of bread, which is only beinoy lebeinoy, if they ever get divorced, that neder comes back into force. Maybe that's shut. So Gemara says. Omer Shmuel, another mistake she made from two loaves of bread. Ba'achas misana, ba'achas ein misana. One of them just causes inui. The deprivation causes pain, and one of them doesn't. Once she can annul one loaf, she can annul the other loaf. Even if the other loaf is not even beinoy lebeinoy, it's just a luxury. Once you can annul one, you can know the other one. That's what he says. However, Rab Asi says, name Rabbi Yechanan, meifel lemisana ve'ein meifel she'ein misana. You can be meifel the misana, but you cannot be meifel the other one. And the Ran explains the crux of the argument is, you cannot be made for a half a neder. Because it says, if part of the neder is bottled, the whole neder is bottled. So what in the world is going on here? How can Shmuel, how can Rabbi Yechanan that the loaf of bread which causes inui has been annulled and the other one doesn't? The first opinion makes sense. You cannot do a partial annulment. It's one neder. Either it's a whole neder or not. Because sorry, split it. But how can he made it to one neder? So the Ran says, when do we say a person cannot annul part of the neder? Is you could have annulled the entire neder, you decide to annul part of the neder. You can't do that. Here, you cannot annul more than one loaf of bread because the first loaf of bread is causing pain. The second loaf of bread is not causing pain. So the law says you can only annul one loaf of bread and you cannot annul another. Here, then we don't say, since you cannot do a partial annulment. You did a full annulment of what you could have. And that's what Rabbi Yechanan says. Therefore, you can annul the bread that causes the inui and not the other one. And the first opinion, Shmuel says, no. In all this, because it's a pasuk, so therefore we take the pasuk literally, that you cannot annul a part of a neder. It's either the entire neder annulled or none of the no part of the neder is annulled. Yeah. There's more further. That's one version of this story. Ikidami, there's another version. In fact, asked a question. Not that he said, he asked him a question. Tell me, you made a loaf of loaves of bread, and one of them causes you pain, one doesn't. Mao, what's it in? Probably he said, you can only be made for the part that causes you the pain and not the part that doesn't cause you the pain. So that was what Rabbi Yechanan himself had to say. Yeah. Anyway, says about it further. Ace will ask you a question. So you're telling me we have a machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Shmuel whether you can sort of annul part of a neder where part of the neder is inui and part of the neder is not. So let's look at nazir, because a nazir, when someone becomes a nazir, they deprive themselves of wine, which is called inui. In fact, we say we bring a korban chatzah according to one of Rabbi Hakapar says you bring a chatzah because you denied yourself wine. That's inui. Then the other part is that you cannot contaminate yourself to the dead. There's no inui involved, no pain involved with that, not going to funerals. So, but yet they're both in the same neder. So we find as follows. It says, if a woman went ahead and she made a neder to become a nazir, and yet she continued drinking wine and be metamel amesim, she will get 40 lashes. In other words, she breached her vow of being a nazir. What happens? The husband annulled her neder, but she wasn't aware that she thought she's still nazir, and yet she committed a sin. She was not aware that she didn't commit a sin. She didn't know shahafala. And she deliberately went ahead and drank wine and metame, thinking she's committing a sin, but she didn't care. She flaunted all that. She committed a sin, but she doesn't get the lashes. And we'll learn that later from it says Hashem Yislachla. If the husband annulled her vow, why do you need Hashem to atone for her sin? What sin? There's no neder. So we learn, talking about she is not aware that her husband annulled her vow. So when she's doing whatever she's doing, she thinks she's committing a sin, but she disregards that. So therefore, a sin she committed, but it's not the lashes that you normally get because she is the fact that she's not a nazir. Okay. Now, the Gemara's question is very simple. If you can tell me, the husband has a right. Let's say you have 2 loaves of bread. He can annul part of the net, like Rabbi Yechina said, the part that's inui, he can annul. But he cannot annul the part that's not inui. So Dilma, perhaps, minyayin, the east of the wine, that there is pain, hafala, he annulled. And remember, the husband could only annul the parts that cause pain. So when he annulled, what are we talking about here? That he canceled her naziris. She wasn't aware, and she thought she's still a nazir, and she drank wine and did everything else. But the husband canceled it. You're telling me that only the parts of inu nefesh are canceled, but the other parts are not canceled. So what part of? So right now we're going to break the wine down further because the Torah says not only you're not allowed to drink wine, you cannot eat the pips of the grapes, you cannot eat the skins of the grapes. Now, not telling someone you can't eat grapes is not the end of the world. Drinking wine already is something else. Drink wine, Shabbos, Yom Tov, meal, you have wine. That's already essential, but not the grapes. So therefore, maybe Noah's what's saying here is maybe Shtaka did commit a sin here. Why isn't she getting 40 lashes? That the cancellation only affects the part of the wine. But the part, the skins and the pips, that part wasn't canceled. The law is the tzara. But why do we say she doesn't get 40 lashes because the husband canceled? She's not aware. Even if the husband canceled it, the cancellation was only going to fall on the wine itself, but it's not going to fall on the other parts like grapes. We're going to the cemetery. It's not going to fall there. It's not going to be canceled. And therefore, she should get 40 lashes according to Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon said no. The zeros is different. There's no such thing as a half a nazir. Either if actually a person says, I only want to be a nazir from wine. Full din of naziris comes into effect. It can't be a half a nazir. And therefore, because it cannot be, what do you call it? So if a person says, I want to be a nazir, but I want to be able to drink wine. I want to be a nazir, but drink cemetery. He becomes a nazir, and all the din will come into effect. So therefore, naziris is different. So if you cancel part of naziris, then time naziris falls away. Now, Abaye is being very pedantic here, digressing for a minute. Abaye said, from the wording, it seems you cannot be a nazir for half, but for half of the din of nazir. But it sounds like you could be a half of a nazir. We know that a nazir has to be 30 days. It says kadosh yihiyah, and interesting. We take the gematria of the word yihiyah, yud k, which equals yud and yud is 20, and hey is 10, 30 days. So we say that the minimum amount of days a nazir has to be a nazir is 30 days. What happens if so it's another 15 days? And when you finish your 30 days, you have to bring 3 kabbanis. And oila, chatzas, shlamim, 3 kabbanis. So what happens if you're a nazir for 15 days? Do you bring kabbanis or not? He said, we know the din if you don't. But it sounds from Rav Yosef that he said there's no naziris for half. But you could have half naziris. I'm going to buy korban lechatz. So I'm going to infer from what your language, but it's just being very pedantic. I'm inferring from your language, but if you're nazir for 15 days, for example, you would have to bring a korban or the kabbanis. And we know it's not so. There's no halfway point by nazir at all in all instances. Not just the nazirs itself. You cannot say I will be a nazir from wine, but I don't mind going to cemetery or whatever. You can't do that. Nor can you be a nazir for half the time, 15 days. Says the Gemara. I'll ask you a question. Isha should not be a nazir. A woman, let's say, said, I will be a nazir, be frisha behemta. She set aside an animal, which turns out to be later doesn't really have any relevance to this case. The achikach hafala baila, she was a nazir for 10 days, 15 days, and then her husband annulled it. Meviya chatas hayayim, she only had to bring one bird. The chatas ha'oif, it's a bird you bring for a korban chatas, and that's the only bird you bring. And she doesn't have to bring the oilas ha'oif, only the chatas ha'oif. The aim of the oilas ha'oif. Now the question is, turned out to be he annulled the neder. Now, the difference between a husband's hafara and a chachman's hatara is, we said according to Moshe Shainim, chachman's hatara is you never nazir in the first place, but a husband's hafara means you're nazir till today, but no longer. So she wanted to be nazir for 30 days, which is tam naziris, and the husband cut it down the middle. So 15, day number 15, he cut it down. He can't. Yeah, whatever, exactly. But Lapoil, she was a nazir for 15 days. If she would have done something wrong prior to the husband's hafara, she would get full malchus. So she was a nazir 15 days. And you're telling me she brings a carbon. You just said there's no such thing as half nazir, so there should be no carbon. The Amrit and carbon lechatz. You're telling me this. So this is all a digression from our general subject here. You can tell me there's no zir for half a subject. Why bring a chatz? So Abai asked back, okay, so what do you want to say? You want to prove from here that yes, carbon lechatz. So why only bring one? A nazir brings three kabbanas. Why should he bring zoyla soif? If your understanding is that you could bring a half a nazir. Shalosh baby by last three. Should bring three. Chatas zoyla shlamim. Elas of the Baya. I'll tell you what's going on. I'm right. There's no carbon of chatz naziris. So why should she even bring a chatas oif? Why bring anything wrong? The chatas oif the mas. You know what chatas oif? Which is the chatas ala safi. Chatas oif is the only bird you bring. If a woman gave birth and she's not, and when a woman gives birth, she has to bring karbanos to the end of the 80 days or 40 days. What happens? She doesn't know if it's a miscarriage. She miscarried, and she doesn't know whether there was really a fetus inside there or just a sack of blood. So it's a suffix if there was a child there or not. She still brings a chatas oif because the chatas oif is the only animal, the only carb you can bring even on a suffix. So therefore, since on a subject and this woman here was a nazir for 15 days, you know what? Bring the chatas oif. That's it. The chatas subject. Getting back to our subject, the question of Isha Shenadra. So we're now talking back again. What Shmuel said, Shmuel, if a husband cancels only the one loaf of bread, which is essential, what happens to the other loaf of bread? Shmuel says other loaf of bread falls away because once you do a part, the whole thing falls off. And Rabbi Yechanan says no. That the part that is inu nefesh, the loaf of bread, which is essential, that part is cancelled. The other loaf of bread, which is not essential, is not cancelled. So Eishel asked a question. Isha should not have been nazir. If a woman made a neder and nazir, it became tummy. And then the husband cancelled it. If she brings a chatas oif, this is what we just learned. The aim mevia oilas oif, and you don't bring the oilas oif. Now, this was supposed to do with us. If you tell me that Mayfil Miss Anna, that you can only annul the part that causes pain, which is the wine. We're not going to break it down between the wine and the grapes. It's just the wine. And you do not cancel the part that is not, which is going to the cemetery. So so therefore his cancellation only took effect on the wine. No, you can drink wine. But the part about going to the cemetery is not cancelled. So therefore, she should have to bring all the kabbalah. She's a nazir till the full term for the other things, other parts. So we answer, Amri, we will say, Tumas mes nami isla tzaira, depriving her from going to the cemetery, to the funeral, also causes pain. What kind of pain is that? So interesting thing. It says in Kehelas, it says in Kehelas that it's better to go to the house of a mourner than the house of a bride. And while you're there, learn from that. You should apply to your heart. Now, what should you apply to your heart? What exactly should you learn from there? The Lubavitch Rebbe's theme in Tovshim and Ches after the Rebbe passed away, the whole year was a chayit in a liba. We have to constantly learn and apply to ourselves and learn from this situation. So what does the Gemara say? What does it mean? The Tanya we learned. Rameir said, this that it says, whatever you do good, it will be reciprocated. The yispoid, if you're going to mourn others who pass away, then yispot and lay. When you pass away, people are going to mourn you. They'll miss you. So chayit liba applies. Remember, invest. Whatever you do now, you're investing in your own future. Because the way you behave, that's how people will reciprocate to you. The yiv kain, if you cry for shed tears for other people who passed away, yiv kain lay, they'll cry for you. The yik bird, if you really put yourself out there and people attend the levaya and everything else, then yik varu, no, you'll have the same thing will apply to you. Therefore, not going to the cemetery, depriving someone going to funerals is actually harming herself. So when the husband annuls the part of a nazir which is harming her, which is the wine, it also annuls the the cemetery as well. The Rishonim already asked, how can you annul part of a neder? We just said before you cannot annul part of a neder. It's all of it. So the chayda, what's more saying here? That you only annul the wine and you don't annul the cemetery. And they say an interesting thing. They say in the Ziris, we learned, or we will learn in the thing, that you could be, we had it before as well, there's a concept of a nazir where you're not allowed to drink wine, you're not allowed to take a haircut, but you could go to the cemetery. It's called nazir shimshon. So because in theory, a nazir, there is such a concept of a naziris without precluding yourself from going to the cemetery, therefore the husband is able to cancel. It's like you are canceling a full naziris, not a part naziris, even though in this particular case it happens to be part of her naziris, but it's in Indian, because he's canceling a full naziris, therefore it could have been cancelled. So we remain with the argument of Rabbi Yechon and Shmuel, and Allah is like Rabbi Yechon, that the part that's cancelled is cancelled, and the part that is not inui is not cancelled, because since you cannot cancel it, then it's not like you're only doing a part cancellation. Okay, we'll stop here.